there is an interview with Andrew Tate and Piers Morgan, and for a couple of minutes they talk about depression, and I want to react to that. I'm a German psychologist. I haven't watched the full interview yet, so it's also new to me.
What do you believe about depression? Do you believe depression is a real thing?
I believe that feeling depressed is real. I don't believe depression as a clinical disease is real, no.
Really?
Correct.
You don't believe people can be clinically depressed?
I think PTSD is very real.
That's interesting, because I'm a systemic psychologist, and basically by nature we also don't really believe in a diagnosis. So for example, when somebody's depressed, we're not a big fan of saying you have the diagnosis of being clinically depressed, because that's not helpful. And being depressed, even in a sense, is a competence. It shows you something. You maybe take this deep rest, take a step back, your body and mind shows you something is going wrong. Great, use this as a compass and let's change something. And also your depression depends on your situation in life. It's not like you are clinically depressed. So I'm not sure whether he's aware of that, but it's actually, I like what he's saying so far. And I'm curious what else he's adding to that.
Unfortunately, I have some friends who suffer from that. I know that feeling depressed is real. I believe that the number one power you have against these things are trying to take control of your own mind and affecting your own life.
Also interesting factor, studies have also shown that the number one factor to let go of depression is to take responsibility. So that is an important aspect also in psychotherapy, to help people to take responsibility, to feel the self-efficacy again, to feel like, hey, I can change something, I can do something, and I have power in this world to also change my life. The problem is just, part of the definition of having symptoms of being depressed is to also feel helpless and hopeless. So just saying, hey, take responsibility, that doesn't work quite often, because that's exactly why they're in the struggle, right? Is to tell somebody who's unhealthy, maybe has cancer, to just say, hey, just be healthy, that's going to be the solution. Yeah, but how do I do that? So I get his point, but the struggle is like, how do you help people out of that? It's not probably that simple.
I believe that it's not healthy to hand over all your power and believe that depression is an outside disease that you can't affect.
But nobody said that. Who said it's an outside disease that nobody can affect? I don't know why he's just adding this into the conversation. I'm not sure where he has this from.
I know that when I've had difficult periods in my life, and also many of my friends, like I've said, suffer from PTSD and been through terrible things. I've lived a very difficult life, and I know people who have, that the things that made them feel better is when they woke up and said, you know what, I'm not going to allow this to damage me anymore. I'm going to take responsibility. I'm going to get up and I'm going to fight this as hard as I can.
Right, and by the way, on that, I agree.
So we agree.
Right? My favorite speech is the Rocky Balboa one.
Okay, so then we agree. No, we did.
Here's where we don't agree.
Piers.
You don't. No, hang on. You've got to let me interject when I don't agree with you.
Sure.
Right? Where I don't agree with you is that there's no such thing as clinical depression. There absolutely is.
Well,
it's a proven scientific medical reality. There's a different argument about have we gone a bit too soft, right, in schools and all the rest of it. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Do I think some people moan and whine too much about their lot in life? Definitely.
Okay.
Are we a victimhood society? 100%.
Okay.
Is there such a thing as clinical depression? Absolutely.
So
and my argument is that if you actually bracket everybody who's not clinically depressed and doesn't have the genuine medical condition...
I think they're talking about the same thing, just from a different angle. Yes, there is clinical depression. There are people who feel depressed. That's real. And Andrew also says the feeling of feeling depressed is a real feeling. I think they talk about the same thing, actually. It's just that Andrew doesn't like the idea of I'm depressed and I don't have control over this. And he's right with that regard, that this doesn't help to use this as an external excuse. But also nobody says that this is the idea of a diagnosis. It's not like you have this and now you cannot change that. As a psychotherapist, you give a diagnosis and then you work on it and then you change it. That's my job, basically.
Then actually, if millions of people are deemed to have depression, the ones who really need the help don't get it. Well, that's my point.
Well, that I would agree with. You're right. I think it's certainly an overused term.
But you don't accept there is such a thing as clinical depression.
No, I don't.
And that to me is a damaging view.
Okay.
But by the way, what Piers Morgan here said, it's not a damaging view to reject that. That's systemic psychology. That's systemic psychotherapy, to not give this diagnosis and simply say, well, you have a couple of emotions and feelings. It's not like you are depression. You have those negative, and you perceive it as negative and depressed feelings right now. Great, let's take a closer look why you have them, because there's a very good reason for that. and let's change that. And we don't need to put this label of a diagnosis on there. So in some regard, that's even helpful because people don't feel so problematic and they feel more seen in the way they are. So I don't think it's necessarily a problem because Andrew he's not rejecting the idea of feeling depression and depressed, if I get it correctly.
Well, let me explain why. If someone comes to me and says, I'm clinically depressed or I feel very, very sad, I would say the first thing you need to do is stop accepting the identity of a clinically depressed person. Stop accepting you have no control over this. And what you need to do is stop identifying that way and let's work together to try and fight against it.
But there isn't an eminent doctor in the world who would tell you there is no such thing.
I think they just talk about the same thing from a different angle. I mean, it's not helpful to put this depression label on a person. You are depressed, cannot do anything about this. But obviously it's true that people do feel depression. And in psychology and psychotherapy, also as a psychiatrist, you then call this clinical depression. You put a name on it, and those are the symptoms. I think they just talk about it from different angles.
I think Johann Hari wrote a book saying exactly that, my friend.
He's not an eminent doctor.
Okay.
No, but
he's a journalist.
I said depression wasn't real long ago and was attacked for it. Then Johann Hari wrote a book, which
What's
actually...
What's it got to do with Johann Hari?
Because he wrote a book proving me right. Most people...
Johann Hari's a journalist.
I don't know the guy.
And my point is that a lot of people who are clinically depressed are suffering with something in their life, and if you fix the problem in their life, perhaps they won't feel depressed anymore. That's not a disease.
Yeah, but Andrew...
That's situational.
Andrew, you're simply wrong.
If that's what you believe, Piers...
That's what I believe.
I don't believe in things that take power away
There is not...
Yeah, I don't believe in things that take power away from me. I like that this is exactly the point. But I think Andrew Tate has this wrong connection of a diagnosis means I don't have power. I think that's the point, that the connection he makes that somehow exists. The diagnosis means I don't have power, I am just surrendered to it. And that's not truthful. And there is this problem with a lot of people having that. That's why a systemic psychologist, for example, like me, doesn't like to put it in that way and wants to more disconnect and say, okay, you have those depressive feelings, but we can do about it right now. And Andrew Tate has this connection between a diagnosis means I cannot change it, I just surrender to it and have the victim mentality. But that's not true. Like, he assumes that that's the way it is.
Do you think you know more than doctors?
I can't become clinically feel depressed anymore. That's not a disease.
Yeah, but Andrew...
That's situational.
Andrew, you're simply wrong.
Okay, that's bullshit. I mean, just... Okay, again, I mean, it's just his way of phrasing it. I mean, he can feel depressed, but he cannot become clinically depressed.
Why do you know?
Because I don't believe in it. I can't be haunted by a ghost if I don't believe in ghosts.
Well, that's like saying I'm never going to die because I don't believe in it. It's ridiculous.
Perhaps. But if it allows me to live a life where I feel happy and
But here's
content
where you
within
see,
myself.
this is that little area where you lose me.
No, I don't lose you.
You are, because
Piers,
somebody with your following says
the thousands of people who have emailed me saying my doctor told me I was clinically depressed and it's a disease that I have got in my brain and I can't be fixed.
What kind of doctor would say that it cannot be fixed? I don't believe in that, to be honest.
I started listening to you and I realized that that's not the case and I can fix my own life and you're the only person who has ever helped me. Thousands of people have emailed me that exact email.
If you think you are single-handedly curing people of clinical depression, you are living in cloud cuckoo land.
I am reading the emails of people who I have cured of clinical
depression. And I actually do think Andrew Tate is correct with that quite a lot of people have been in some sort of depression and then consume more of Andrew Tate's content and get this wake-up call of, wait, I can do something. I don't need to inhibit my aggression, which is, by the way, also a big factor for depression, inhibiting one's aggression. So standing up for yourself, living your own life, taking charge of your own life. That's what I got so far. It's also the core message of Andrew Tate. And I think a lot of people need that, especially young male people who are sort of like in this mellow depression, actually helps them to get out of that, working hard, living their own lives, standing up for their own needs. I do think for some people, to some degree, it is helpful and motivating to listen to Andrew Tate and actually make them feel a bit less depressed. I believe in that, but I don't think this is the case for everybody.
You're reading emails from people who have believed you when you say there isn't such a thing, and they've probably never been diagnosed clinically depressed. They just want to go along with what Andrew Tate says.
I don't think so.
I think your view of that view is dangerous.
I respect that you think my view is dangerous, and I respect you have the right to view that, to think that. I think that clinical depression, I actually agree with you, is massively overdiagnosed. I've already said that PTSD is a very real thing. I've already said...
hang on.
Okay.
Again, you're misquoting me. I did not say clinical depression is massively overdiagnosed. I said that people who claim to be depressed but don't have clinical depression I think that is massively overblown. But a clinically depressed person has an absolutely proven medical condition that is beyond their control.
Not according to me and many others, my friend.
Well, look, what do you know about it, honestly?
I mean, it's true that depression to a degree is also based on genetics. So in some families where there's more depression, the probability is higher that you also then get depression. That's true. To some degree, you don't have control over that. To some degree, depression and happiness, your entire happiness level, to some degree, maybe it's 40%. Don't pin me down on that. I think around 40% studies have shown is based on genetics, how happy you are in life. But then there's also a lot of, I think it's like 60%. No, sorry, maybe also 40% of you having control over things. So they're both right. To a degree, there is genetics involved and you don't have control over it. To a degree, you have control over it. And let's focus on the control part though, because with this part, you can increase your happiness and decrease your depression to a degree, most likely, that a psychiatrist or psychotherapist would not diagnose you with a depression anymore. For most people. Of course, there's like 0.5% of the population who are depressed who simply have some imbalance with their hormones.
I know.
You're not a doctor, are you? Not trained, are you?
I'm not a doctor.
You're not a psychiatrist. You're none of those things.
Sure.
You're a guy on the make. He's done very well for himself, spouting stuff off, much of which I agree with, as you've seen in the interview, but some of which is ludicrous, and that's one of them.
It's not ludicrous.
I mean, Andrew Tate has some overconfidence. I don't think I'm adding any new information here, but he is overconfident in some way, yes.
It is.
It's not.
If you said to me, we're in a victimhood society, it's got to stop, I'm with you.
Okay.
But the moment you try and deny clinical depression...
I believe feeling depressed is real. I do not believe it's a disease that you catch from the sky and you cannot affect.
Totally agree.
I believe that no matter what happens, I believe you have control of your own mind and you can fight against it. I believe if you change your circumstances in your life, you may feel different. I'll give you a quick example. I had a guy who emailed me saying he was clinically depressed and he was going to kill himself. I obviously am not a psychiatrist, I'm not a doctor. I told him, because I replied to my emails. I said, have you been to a psychiatrist? He said, yes, I'm clinically depressed. I've been on these pills, this amount of time. I'm on antidepressants, it doesn't work. I said, I don't know what to say to you besides this. And he said he lost his girlfriend, that's why I became clinically depressed. I said, listen, go to the gym, get a six-pack first. Once you've got a six-pack, email me again. If you still feel like killing yourself, I don't know what else to say to you. But I'd say, strong body is a strong mind, go train. He went, he started sending me progress pictures, emailing me him getting in better shape, and eventually got a six-pack. He's now a professional bodybuilder. And he said, I can't believe I was considering that. I feel so much better, etc. The doctor was telling him he was clinically depressed and couldn't cure it. He started taking control of his own life, and now he felt better. Now, I'm not saying it's the case for everybody.
No.
I'm just saying.
Here's my question, though. Have you seen the guy's medical records?
Of course not. I just told you the
So
story.
you're just taking his word for it?
I am taking the word of a man who emailed me with a bunch of medication and specific doses.
You're denying proven science because one guy writes to you who you help and you've not seen any evidence he ever had clinical depression diagnosed.
They're both pretty smart in the way how to lead discussions and think logically. I like that.
You know, rants in public to tens of millions of people denying something because this guy writes to you and says he had it and you cured him. And I think that's a dangerous mindset, Andrew.
That's fine.
And that's where you don't have a responsible view of your influence over people.
Disagree. It's very responsible because I'm saving people's lives. I disagree that if you feel depressed, I disagree that you cannot affect it and change your life and take control and fix yourself and feel happier. I disagree with that.
Do you think?
I refuse to accept that there are people out there who cannot become happy, contented individuals. I refuse to accept we live in a world where God has created people who, no matter how hard they work and how good their life becomes, can't be happy. I don't accept that.
But who said that? Who said that?
I accept that the universe is a very giving place and that God loves all of us. And if you try your best and you work hard, you can become a better person.
He has this evil idea of that psychiatrists and psychotherapists just give people a diagnosis and then that's the way it is and they cannot change. And I'm curious where this limiting belief comes up. And that's exactly why they have this debate, because in the end, I think actually both are right. They just talk about it on different levels.
And I also will argue with you, and I'll counter the point, that you sitting here on your platform telling people they have clinical depression, there's nothing they can do about it, is far more dangerous. Okay, well then, if they have clinical depression...
Why do you misquote me?
No, because you're saying...
You hate being misquoted.
No, you're saying if people have clinical depression, that they have a
nothing
disease.
to do about it. They go to a doctor and they get diagnosed and they get help.
Then I would argue the point that if somebody...
It's the complete opposite of what you just said I said.
I would argue the point that if somebody has depression of any kind, whether it's clinical, whether it exists or not, whether they feel depressed or not, whatever, that taking control control of their life, taking personal responsibility, and working hard is always going to be the positive, best thing they can possibly do for their life going forward.
How positive
and the people
is
going around
it?
them. So sitting here saying, I don't believe in clinical depression, you don't believe in depression. No, I don't. I believe that people can take control and fight against things.
Right.
I believe in personal sovereignty.
Right. Fine.
Good. So we agree.
No, we don't.
Yes, we do.
No, we don't.
No, I think they do. Okay. Great interview. I think both have a good point. Generally, Andrew Tate has this wrong connection of a diagnosis means you don't have control over it. I don't know where this belief is coming from. I like his idea that there's not this diagnosis and you have a problem now and you cannot change that. And I like the idea of taking responsibility. I think that fits very well to what people need, because people who are depressed having this feeling of learned helplessness. So I cannot do anything about this. And people need to have this feeling again of, hey, wait, actually I can change. Simply telling them you have responsibility maybe works with some, not with everybody. That's why psychotherapy is also very helpful. Also standing up not for your only need, not only for your own needs, but also for your own emotions and allow them is very helpful. A lot of depressed people inhibit a lot of aggression. So it's also helpful to really just stand up for your own needs, acknowledge your own desires in a healthy way, of course. Andrew Tate is also saying that. I like that as well. And yeah, I think good discussion. Not too much to criticize here, I have to admit.